folks, Dave here at Thunder Mesa Studio, where I'm trying my hand at something a little bit different this time around. A roadside Indian trading post from the 1950s.
You know, one of the cool things about being in the model kit business is that occasionally I get to play with parts and pieces for kits that are in the R&D phase, things that we may produce as kits or may not. Some of you may remember we did a kit for the Last Chance gas station. It came out in HO and S scale, available now from Crescent Creek Models. And the HO and S scale kits sold well, so we thought, well, maybe we'll do one in O scale. So we cut some parts and started in on that, and found that all of the detail parts and everything would make the kit very expensive. So we started casting around for something else to do with the parts. And I started to put this particular one together. This is just a O-scale version of the same walls that come in the Last Chance gas kit. And I was looking at it and thinking, well, maybe we could make it into a trading post, like you see out on Route 66 or I-40 out there, out near Gallup or Winslow, out in the desert. A Navajo trading post. And so I'm going to take the pieces that I have for the Last Chance gas kit and O scale, and I'm going to build a trading post circa early 1960s, late 50s, early 60s, something like that. So join me as I start putting this together and figuring out how I'm going to do it. Well, now that I've glued the main walls together already, the first thing I want to do is take some sandpaper. What is this? 80 grit. And round off all of the corners as much as I can to give it that adobe look. Well, the walls are made from some 1/8 inch thick MDF, and it has a floor too, which has been cut from some 1/4 inch MDF, and I've gone in with some acrylic paints to give it the look of a flagstone, since I want something visible. I don't think I'm going to detail the interior on this build this time around. Maybe I'll come back to it at a future time. I'll make the roof removable so I can do that. But I wanted you to be able to see something when you looked in the window. So gave it a flagstone floor, which is pretty common in these old structures. Now I want to add some adobe brick detail to the outside. It's going to be covered in plaster. I'm going to use the Crescent Creek scale stucco on this, but I want to have some places where the plaster has weathered and chipped away. Now I've just gone in with a pencil and a straight edge and drawn in some adobe bricks where the plaster will be broken away. These are 3/16 high by 5/16 of an inch long, each one of these bricks. And now I need to figure out the best way to carve these shapes out of this MDF. Well, after experimenting with just about every sharp hand tool that I own, plus a Dremel, I think I've come up with a way to carve these adobe bricks somewhat efficiently. First, we scribe a line, like so. And then I use a triangular shaped file to get in there and widen it. Just run it back and forth like that. Don't forget to carry it around the corner there. And then for the vertical lines, same thing. Just scribe and go back with the file. Carefully kind of gouge that out. Now obviously this is not going to be quick, so let's do a time lapse. those adobe bricks scribed in, I can go back with a chisel tool in my X-Acto knife here, chisel blade, and kind of gouge some of these out. Very similar to what I did on the Butterfield stage. If you watch that video, the Butterfield Stage Depot, to model those adobe bricks. Difference is this is MDF rather than basswood, so it carves a little differently. It's much more like carving down through layers of paper, because hey, that's pretty much what it is. By the way, if there's any place where you slipped with the file, this is a good way to go back and hide those mistakes. That gives you the idea. And just take a little fine sandpaper and clean that up. I think the carving is pretty much done. Now I'm going to get a coat of primer on here. I'm going to prime it with some Rust-Oleum dark brown camo. Then I'll come back and paint the adobe bricks with acrylics. I'm ready to paint some adobe-like colors on here now. So I'm going to mix up something that'll work. I've got some burnt sienna, a little unbleached titanium. Mix those together. A nice adobe brick color. Okay, I kind of want to dry brush this on, so I get most of that off the brush. Just hit the tops of the bricks. The reason I paint it a dark shade like this as the primer coat is so that when you dry brush on the color, those lines between the stones shown through. I'm using a stiff hog's bristle brush for this. I'm not being too particular or precise where there aren't stones, where there aren't bricks, because all of that is going to be covered with stucco in a following step. See, rather than putting on a lot of paint all at once, the idea is to kind of build it up in thin, dry brushed layers. A much better, much more convincing result that way. Looks much more like actual adobe bricks rather than painted MDF. Now I'm just going to mix in some more of the unbleached titanium to create a slightly lighter shade. Very lightly just hitting the tops here. Now I'll probably have to go back and touch up here and there when all is said and done, but that's a good start. It gets me going in the right direction. Next step is to mask these areas off. I'm just going to use some masking tape. This is the good stuff, the green. This is called frog tape. Nice low tack masking tape, painter's tape. Put that right over my adobe bricks. And then take a hobby knife, kind of cut it away. Now we'll stucco right over all that, and when the stucco's dry and after it's been painted, peel the tape off and it will reveal the adobe bricks underneath. Let's do the front here. Now I can take the Crescent Creek Models scale stucco, which is just a heavy-bodied acrylic modeling paste, and using another stiff brush, just stipple it on the walls like this, right up to the edge of the tape. You got to be careful not to get too rambunctious around the door and window openings, because the stuff does build up. If you do get it where you don't want it, like inside this lodgepole hole there, I can just pick it out like that. All in all, I ended up putting on about 4 coats of the stucco. I'm going to use some 220 sandpaper and just knock the texture back a little bit now that it's dry. Now to paint my stucco, I'm using exactly the same colors I used for the adobe, but in pretty much opposite proportions. A lot more of the unbleached titanium and a lot less of the burnt sienna. Well, basically a Navajo white is what we're going for. Kind of a peachy, not too pink. You don't want it too pink. Or maybe you do, I don't know. I don't want it too pink on this model. Now, when this is closer to being finished, I'll go back and add a lot more weathering. But right now what I want to do is just take some unbleached titanium and go around the base of the structure here and dry brush it on to desaturate the color down here near the bottom of the building. It's a subtle but effective detail, way to add some age and realism to an adobe structure like this. Now for the moment of truth. I think we can peel this masking tape off. Let's see what our adobe bricks look like. Oh yeah, I like that. Now I'm just taking the hobby knife and going around and adding some cracks here and there in the plaster. Show how it's slowly coming off the building. This is a good place for one right here. Just cutting straight down through. Easy to overdo this, so I'm just going to stop here soon. You can kind of chip it. Yeah, I dig it. Now I think I can go ahead and glue the floor in. Now I've got some of this acrylic dye from Wild West Scale Models. They call it Smoke and Mirror Solutions. I'm using some dark brown, and I've thinned it down some more with some 70% rubbing alcohol because I just want a light wash on the structure here. I'm just going to go over everything with it and just add a little grime and age to the building. And this will soak into those cracks I made, darken those up, and bring out the texture and the detail. Got to be careful though, because the alcohol can dissolve and thin the acrylic paint that's already on there, so you got to move fast. I've assembled the doors and windows that I'm going to use pretty much according to the instructions found in the S and HO scale versions of the Last Chance gas kit. But I made a few variations. I removed the large front windows from the front door assembly just to make this next step easier. And I've already put a coat of gray primer on there because I want these to look like it's old chipped paint on all of these doors and windows. They're actually going to be painted turquoise, but first I need to add, since this is made from laser board, not wood. If it was wood, I would have stained it, but it's laser board, so I painted it gray, and I'm going to dry brush on some grays and light tans so that when the paint is chipped off, it'll look like there's wood underneath. Already mixed up a little bit of turquoise. I'm going to use the same technique that I used on the Goldie's place. If you watch that build, I got a stipple brush here, and I'm going to stipple it on with this, and that just means I'm going to experiment on the roof here that mostly won't be seen. The front doors. Now, this is a really strong color, and you might be asking yourself, if you've not traveled in the desert Southwest, is this prototypical? Absolutely. This is they love this turquoise up on the reservation. I see it everywhere. Now with that dry, I'm just going to take some some fine sandpaper, kind of take off the top of the paint there. Let that gray underneath show through. Go very light here. You don't want to sand so hard that you're going to go down through the primer and into the into the laser board. I've cut some clear acrylic glazing to fit all the windows and the doors. I'm just going to glue those in place with a few dabs of Eileen's tacky glue up here in the corners. I think I've mentioned before I prefer using this over cyanoacrylate because it doesn't fog the acetate or the clear acrylic. I've already installed the side door here. Give you a little preview of how things are going to look. Okay, I think I can put these front windows in. This nice wide tab for gluing. I like using the Eileen's for this because it bites really fast and holds. Little fiddly bits like this, it makes things easier. One fun and easy detail to add on old buildings like this is a broken window. Just using the hobby knife to put a couple of cracks in this rear window. An extra detail I want to add is a wood lintel above all the doors and windows. You can see I already did it on the side door here. And that's a detail that we often see on these old adobe buildings in the Southwest. The problem is there's no notch cut in to the wall here. It wasn't designed for that. If I was going to start from scratch, I would probably laser cut that in there, but got a simple solution. I'm just going to use some 1x6 that I've stained up, and put one there for the bottom of the lintel, and then one right across the surface here to represent the exposed part of it. So that should work nicely, I think. So on the HO and S scale versions of the Last Chance gas kit, there's a service bay door back here because it's supposed to be a gas station. Since it's not going to be a gas station this time around, at least not entirely, I've designed a little laser cut lean-to storage shed to fit right here over where that bay door opening is. And right now I'm going to stain up all these pieces and then put them together, and that'll be the next little sub-assembly for my trading post. Now while I wait for the stain to dry on all of this, I can go ahead and cut and stain the lodgepole ends that come out of these holes on each side, and I'm going to need 30 of them, 15 for each side. That's got some 1/8 inch diameter doweling, and I need to cut each one about 30 scale inches long, or 5/8 of an inch. So I better get started on that. Now, even though I'm not going to detail the entire interior right now, I do want to have some interior walls so that when I come back to this model and detail it, I'll have a good head start on it. So I've cut some out of some 300-pound illustration board, cold press Crescent illustration board, which is a little less than 1/16 of an inch thick. And now what I'm going to do is I'm taking my watercolor wash, which is burnt sienna and cobalt blue mixed together to make a kind of a muddy, dirty gray brown, and I'm just doing a wash on the walls like this, just to give them a tone and to give them a little bit of age and stains and things like that that you would see in an old building like this. Now we dry these real quick with a hair dryer. And that gives us the look of old, grimy, stained plaster walls. Now I'm just framing in this faux door to the back room with some O-scale 1x4s. I'm staining with a little bit of Minwax Early American. I'll just add a doorknob to this fake door with Atlas track nail. Push that right through the illustration board. Now I've got some 6x8 beams, and these will run the length of the building at the top of each wall and help to support the removable roof. Two more 6x8 beams in the middle. That'll give me something to hang the lights from, support the roof, and still allow me to access the interior at a later date. Now, I can put all of those lodge poles in. One down. 29 to go. Now I can build this little rear bump out shed. Just adding some Z-braces to the laser cut door using some scale 1x6. Now I can frame that with some 1x4s. Actually, I'm going to trim away the 1x4 so that the roof will fit on there.
I finished the rear shed by adding some 1x4 trim to the corners and 1x2 battens for the board and batten siding.
Before I get too much further on this, I wanted to figure out the lighting for the interior. And what I want is the look of some mid-century incandescent lamps hanging from the ceiling. So I've got some of these little 3mm warm white LEDs, and I've cut a disc from some Bristol board and colored it with a green Sharpie to make the lampshade. And the wiring is going to run, there's a little notch right here that I've cut into this roof beam. So the wiring runs from the lamp through the notch, back into the back room, and out through this hole in the shed back here to below the layout or the diorama or wherever this is going to end up. So I've already made one of those and tested it out. So now I need to make the second one. Start by cutting out a disc. And this is a scale 4 feet across, but of course it'll be smaller once I make a cone out of it. Just a radial line. that. Just using a green Sharpie. Slide one side over the other. Now I can run the wires up through the hole, and the diodes should be enough to hold this in place. Now I want to bend these wires at a right angle so I can run them through this notch. I'm using some thick viscosity gel cyanoacrylate here in the notch to hold it in place. I don't want the wires to stick up higher than the beam, which is why I put the notch in there. I'm going to kick this with a little baking soda, make for a stronger joint. Now I just need to run the wires back. You can kick CA just by blowing on it. It's not as efficient as the accelerator, but it does work. And then one more dot back here. Now, since these little LEDs only draw like 1.5 volts, I have to put some resistors on the positive leads. These are 510 ohm resistors. It doesn't matter where in the run that you put them, so I'm putting them down here towards the end where it's more convenient for me. Now I can wire everything up in parallel, so there's only one little pigtail of wire coming out through the hole down there. Now I can put the roof on temporarily. Roof's made from some illustration board. Put that in there. Let's see how the lights look. Nice. Just what I was going for. Now I need to make some corrugated metal roofing for this rear shed right here. The main roof is going to be tar paper, but I think I want the rear roof to be corrugated metal. So I've created this little jig, which is just it's made from a paint stir stick, which I've cut down. This is some 40 thou phosphor bronze wire that I've ACC'd in place the best I can. And then these two sides, see, it's hinged with some gaffer's tape. So the two sides flip over and lock together to make a mold for the aluminum. And for that, I'm just using an aluminum can that I've cut up. Any aluminum can will do. Doesn't have to be too straight, because I'm going to trim it to size after I get the corrugations in it. Make sure these teeth line up. And I'm just going to use a rubber mallet. Gently. Not bad. I want pieces that are 3 feet wide by 8 feet long. So now I just trim that down. Okay, we got some gray primer on here. Now I'm just going to blot on some lighter gray with a sponge, just to give it a little bit of mottled color here. Now I'm going to do the rest of the weathering with some colored chalk, mixing up some kind of terracotta color with some orange. I can glue the subroof on. I just cut a subroof from some Crescent illustration board. I haven't done much to detail this illustration board. I just went around the edges with a stain marker. To adhere the corrugated roofing, I'm going to use some Eileen's tacky glue. Just paint it right on the subroof here. A lot easier to paint it on this than it is on the back of those aluminum panels. I want the main roof to be tar paper, so I've cut some black construction paper into a scale 4-foot wide strips, and now I'm just going to glue that on the roof. It's okay if that glue soaks through there. It actually adds to the look. Gives it kind of a wrinkly tar paper look. Now on the very end, where it on the lower edge of the roof, I want this to wrap around underneath like this, just like that. Now some of these I'm just going to take and crumple up like that, then uncrumple it, glue it down. You want to have some wrinkles in there. Also have to have at least one good patch on here. I think right about here. Now I'll use a small brush and some thick black acrylic paint to represent tar. And just go along the seams. You want to brush it on, you want to kind of just dab it on. Like that. So it's sort of dimensional. It sticks up a little bit. Just do some weathering here with some chalks. I just want to create some little variation between these different strips of roofing paper. Makes some look like they're older than others. Alright, let's get some fixative on that. I'll put another strip of tar paper here to mate up with it at the front of the roof. There we go. And here I've cut a little hole and I've created a bathroom ceiling vent. This is some piece of cocktail straw with a toothpick glued into one end. And just put a little glue on this and put it down in the hole. Okay. Now I want a big flagstone front porch on my trading post, and there's several ways that I could model this. What I chose to do is create a laser etched piece. This is some 1/8 inch thick basswood that I've etched with a flagstone pattern. This was actually from a photo of real flagstone, an overhead photo, and then I manipulated it to bring the contrast up and etched it with my laser. And now I just need to carry the borders between the stones, the grout lines, around the edges. So I'm using a triangular file for that. I've also decided to create some laser cut details for the trading post. I've already built this Coke machine, which is made out of the same kind of ivory poly back, some printed paper, and some MDF for the core. I didn't really document the build because it's kind of beyond the scope of the trading post. This is you can get commercial parts like this, but I just wanted to try my hand at building one, scratch building one with the laser, and I think that turned out pretty nice. Now I'm doing the same thing for an ice machine. This is one of those ubiquitous retail ice machines that you see at every gas station and corner store. I'll put this together. It just folds up like a little box. Got some red oxide primer on the flagstone, and that actually doesn't look too bad, just like it is. But I'm going to add some grout in between the stones. Just a little bit of spackling compound. Rub it right over the surface. Fill in all of those cracks. Now we can take a damp paper towel, not wet, just damp. Squeeze all the water out. Rub it right across the top here. Now I want to gray that grout down a little bit, so I'm just going to use my India ink wash and rubbing alcohol wash over the top, and then I'm going to blot almost all of it off. Now the trick is to go back with a selection of terracottas and grays and tans and kind of pick out some of the individual stones. For the porch awning, I've got some laser cut pieces, kind of a Southwestern style beam that goes across here that's made of some 1/8 inch thick basswood, and then the rafters are 16th inch, the same sort of profile on the cut into the end there. So I'm just staining these up with some Minwax Early American, and I'll put the whole thing together. I think we'll build the porch awning as a sub-assembly and then attach it to the building.
I shingled the porch roof with some O-scale peel and stick cedar shingles, which I'd stained a dirty desert gray.
I can install the porch now. Now these things on here, those aren't tires, those are actually cement footings. They're supposed to be cement footings, they're actually basswood, for these ponderosa pine logs, which form the uprights for the porch. So I want these to remain a little bit flexible while I do this. A little wiggle room.
Then it was time to very carefully paint the lettering on the ice machine with a 00 brush and some Model Masters acrylics.
Well, now it's time to add all of the colorful signs to the building, and this is a step I've really been looking forward to because it really brings the structure to life. I created a whole sheet of trading post signs in Adobe Photoshop. I also made some Navajo blankets to hang. So right now I'm going to go in and start cutting all these out, mounting them on some illustration board or Bristol board, whatever the thickness is that I need for the sign, and putting them on the building. I think I'm going to start with the big Thunderbird trading post sign up top. Went ahead and built a base for the model, and eventually I'll go back and landscape all of this around the trading post too, but for now it'd be easier to do the final detailing with it sitting in place on here. This is just made from some MDF that I've painted up with some sort of terracotta color paint that I have. I just have a few more posters to add. I'm going to put some back here. So if you're familiar with life on the reservation at all, you might know that rodeo is huge up there, so decided to make me a poster for an old rodeo. Actually, several posters. This printer paper is a little thick, so I've got a piece of sandpaper taped down to some glass, and I'm just going to thin this down just until, because I want it to look old and kind of ragged hanging on the back walls back here. Basically want this paper to be thin enough that when I put some diluted white glue on the back, it will then conform to the board and batten siding on this shed back here, just like a real poster would. There we go, that's not too bad. And now I can add the smoke jack. This is a casting from Tichy Trains. Just got done painting and weathering a little bit. Just painted it flat black and weathered it with some chalks. One very realistic but often overlooked detail is some guy wires holding this smoke jack in place, and it gets windy up there on the big res. Things blow over. So we'll glue this in place with a couple of dabs of thick CA. Wherever you have a smoke jack from a wood stove, you're going to have some soot running down the wall. Now to finish this off, I'm just going to go around with some chalks and a little subtle weathering, particularly on these signs.
Now, ordinarily, this is about the time I'd be saying that this project is all finished and it's time to wrap things up, but I really don't feel like this one is completely finished, if you know what I mean. I want to add a completely detailed interior, do some landscaping around the outside, maybe add a couple of junky old cars, lots more detail, things like that. But that's going to have to wait for a future video, because right now, we're out of time. Thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. I hope you enjoyed my build of the Southwestern Trading Post, and you'll tune in again next time. Until then, adios for now.